Hello. Unfortunately, as your trainer will have already informed you, each year in the United Kingdom there are over 500,000 work-related back illnesses, and this number is on the increase. Particularly vulnerable are those who lift loads, although sedentary workers such as drivers and VDU operators suffer even more back illnesses than manual workers. It is therefore very important that all employees are aware of their responsibilities when it comes to manual handling. In this video, I'll look at manual handling in the workplace and some techniques to ensure that you do not suffer a manual handling injury.
More than a quarter of all the accidents reported each year are associated with transporting or supporting loads, manual handling. And surprisingly, these are not confined to the narrow range of industries that might be expected, but are widespread and can as easily occur in a shop as in a steelworks.
This pie chart shows a further breakdown of the injured body areas covered by the 33% of handling accidents. We can see that damage to the hand, torso, legs, arm, finger and thumb are a very small percentage when compared to the 46% of injuries to the back. And when on examination of a chart showing the types of injury, we find that 64% of accidents caused by manual handling result in either a sprain or a strain. The spine is formed of 24 small bones known as vertebrae. These are positioned so that they can move freely from each other and are separated by a tough disc of cartilage. The discs act as shock absorbers for the spine and remove a lot of the strain to the back as it moves. The spine would be completely useless without the large network of various muscles that support it. Another part of the spine, which is not directly related to posture, is the spinal cord. This passes from the brain to the lower back area, with nerves emerging at intervals from each side of the spinal column. These nerves connect to the limbs, internal organs, head and trunk of the body. Backache can easily be caused by excessive or repeated strain to any one of the main elements which combine to form the spinal column. This strain can be due to wear and tear, being overweight, aging, disease, but most commonly general misuse. Discs can weaken and may suddenly bulge, or as it is medically known, prolapse, and can cause severe back pain. It may even trap a nerve emerging from the spine, creating a pain in the part of the body the nerve is connected to. This type of pain is called referred pain. The muscles that support the back can be overworked, stretched, sprained or torn, and the chances of this type of injury can increase if the muscles are not given sufficient time to relax. Now, this is because the muscles become more tense and stressed by the buildup of waste product chemicals produced by an extended exercise period.
Generally speaking, manual handling should be avoided wherever possible. But when there is no alternative, steps must be taken to reduce the risk of injury, and so it's likely that your employer will carry out an assessment to gauge the risks involved, taking into account the weight, shape and stability of the load, the working environment, and the physical characteristics such as weight, height and strength of the individual concerned. For example, if the load has sharp edges or splinters, then there is a risk of cutting or piercing the skin, and so gloves may be recommended for the handling task. Indeed, the use of protective clothing and footwear is an important factor in the reduction of risk. It is likely then that you'll be provided with specific information on how loads should be handled, together with the necessary training to cover all possible situations. Although there is no maximum weight specified in the regulations, because weight is only one of several factors to consider, you should normally be aware of the weight of a given load, which side is the heaviest if the load is unequally packaged, and if the contents are unstable or likely to shift, such as in some liquids. Although it's back strain that's usually associated with lifting, there are also risks from slips, trips and falls, striking against objects, cuts and trapping or damaging limbs. So therefore, planning the lift is important.
Before you go to lift any load, the best thing to do is to stop and think about what's involved. This box needs to be lifted to the top of a stack, and so it's important to make sure that the stack is stable and is not above the range that the handler can comfortably reach. Also, the handler must check that there are no obstructions or potential hazards between the load and the stack, and that there is plenty of room to move the load into the correct position. He then crouches down, facing the direction of movement, with knees bent, upright back, and feet apart, with one foot in front of the other. After checking directions on the box, he judges the weight of the load and takes a firm grip, with the other hand supporting the base of the load. Finally, the load is lifted whilst holding a deep breath and keeping the load close to the body. In this second example, a stereo speaker has to be lifted onto its display shelf. Again, the handler thinks about the task, checking that there are no obstructions. He bends down close to the load, takes a good firm grip, and then lifts with his legs, keeping the load close to the body. This 30-kilogram sack needs to be moved to a machine, but after thinking about the task, the handler has decided that it's easier to move the load in two halves rather than struggle with one heavy load. What about loading a car? These can seem very unergonomic when loading heavy objects. But in this case, the handler has considered the task and uses the edge of the car to support the bulk of the weight, whilst sliding the load to the base of the boot. Once down, the load can be manoeuvred where necessary, even with a bent back, as the majority of the weight is supported by the car. When working at a desk, get out of the chair if you need to lift. Bend down close to the load and lift using your legs, and of course keeping the back in its naturally upright position. In this case, having mechanical assistance only reduces the risk associated with carrying the load. The handler still has to lift the load correctly in order to reduce the risk even further. When removing loads from a vehicle, the reverse procedure to loading should be used. That is, gently manoeuvring the load using the car as support until the load is at a suitable height, so that it can be lifted with the back as upright as possible. What about pushing a load? Again, all the techniques for pushing recommend that the back is kept as upright as possible, with the powerful leg muscles doing most of the work. And the same is even true with pulling a load. When team handling, make sure that someone has planned and is in charge of the operation, and that all the handlers are of broadly similar height. It should be remembered that the load which can be handled safely by the team is less than the sum of the loads that the individual members could cope with when working alone.
Finally, whenever possible, get help with lifting. Lisa here has offered her assistance. And use any handling aid which may be provided. But above all, use common sense. OK, Lisa, knees bent, straight back. Great. Off you go then.
Well, that's manual handling. And did you spot our deliberate mistake? Your trainer will now take you through this and some of the other issues raised in the video using the remainder of the Healthcare Safety Services training pack. These will include the body and what can go wrong, manual handling hazard that exist in your workplace, the arrangements that are being put into place to minimise the risk, and some practical manual handling techniques. I'm sure you'll enjoy the remainder of the session. See you soon.